Should there be any long-term concern when it comes to CJ Stroud and concussions? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. The Texans quarterback still in concussion protocol. CJ Stroud suffering a concussion in the New York Jets game, and he's on his way to missing his second consecutive game due to that concussion. He missed last week in Tennessee. Case Keenum took care of business. The Texans got a win. Much tougher opponent that Stroud is set to miss this weekend as the Browns are in town to take on the Texans. And Stroud's not really set to play on that one. Hasn't practiced yet, still in concussion protocol, and past the average amount of time that players spend in concussion protocol. Again, this is very much an average of players in concussion protocol. Most players spend about 9 days in concussion protocol, and CJ Stroud is passing that 9-day mark. So is there any sort of concern or worry about CJ Stroud? There's an example that gives you a little bit of hope, but a little bit of pause as well. But ultimately, I was worried about this season, and if we would see CJ Stroud again. So I had to ask DeMeco Ryans about that when he was at the press conference this week.
Is there a chance that this could end his season?
And
the CJ season?
Oh, why you say that? Oh, don't shock me like that, man. No. Wow. No, it's just we're going through the protocol, and each person, each concussion, right, is different. So each person, it takes a different amount of time for each person to heal, just like with anything else. So he's just going through the protocol just like everyone else has throughout whenever they've been in the concussion protocol. And, we just, at the end of the day, like I said last week, and it still stands today, like the most important thing is making sure CJ is healthy. And when he's ready to go, he'll be ready to go. I'll let you guys know.
When he's ready to go, he'll be ready to go, and DeMeco Ryans will let us all know. Well, that's good to hear. And DeMeco Ryans didn't act like a guy that had some reporter spring something that he wasn't supposed to know on him. He acted like a guy that was asked a question that he thought was kind of silly. And ultimately, he said in there, no, this does not endanger CJ Stroud's season. So I would expect CJ Stroud is on his road to recovery and should come back next week. And here's why I say next week, because we have a very recent example of something happening just like this. Take you back to the Denver Broncos game where CJ Stroud took a big hit, came out of the game. Davis Mills came in for a couple of plays, and then CJ Stroud cleared the in-game concussion test and was back in the game and finished out the game against the Denver Broncos for the Texans. Well, the very next week, he took a much bigger hit, a much more drastic hit. His head hit the turf there in New York, which is basically a parking lot that's painted green, and he's had the concussion after that. So a big hit, clears the protocol, back in the following week, and takes a bigger hit, and then misses a couple of games. Well, that happened just last year to Tua Tagovailoa. Tua Tagovailoa took a big hit against the Buffalo Bills and was way worse off than CJ Stroud. He was wobbly. He was having trouble standing up. Well, Tua played in the very next game that the Dolphins had against the Cincinnati Bengals, and he took another big hit, and he suffered a serious concussion. And he was ultimately carted off the field in that Bengals game, and then he missed 2 weeks and played a bunch more the rest of that year. Now, here's the good part is he missed 2 weeks and he was right back at it. Here's one of the bad parts about that. Later in the season, a concussion ended Tua Tagovailoa's season. And the Dolphins played the final couple of games of the season and their playoff game without Tua Tagovailoa and without him because of a concussion. So when you think about CJ Stroud returning for the Titans game, the Indianapolis Colts game, should the Texans make the playoffs, there is a little bit of a concern of re-injury. But that's football. Players get concussed, players get hurt, players re-injure themselves, be it a knee, a foot, an ankle, or a head injury. And I know I gave you the good and the bad. Well, let me finish this sandwich with a little bit more good. No long-term concussion issues for Tua Tagovailoa this season. Tua's been good. He's been dinged up here or there, but it hasn't been a concussion issue at all for Tua in the 2023 season after having concussions drastically affect the 2022 season for him. Now, yes, there were some offseason conversations about Tua taking various forms of mixed martial arts to help to learn how to fall, and he's even said that has helped him a little bit. He's also just done a better job of protecting himself. The Dolphins have done a better job of protecting him as well. And you start to think about, hey, CJ Stroud dealing with a beat-up offensive line, not necessarily seeing all the blitzes all the time. And really, the Jets hit wasn't even the offensive line fault, CJ Stroud's fault, not picking up a blitz fault. Quentin Williams just rock-bottomed CJ like it was WrestleMania when he didn't have to. It was a dirty hit, I still believe, and Williams should have been fined a tremendous amount of money for it. But that's not really something that you plan for. That's just an accident that happens. So I started the question with, when is there a long-term concern for CJ Stroud and the concussion situation that he's dealing with? And I would tell you there's not one unless this lingers past this week into next week's game against the Titans, or in a short amount of time, so against the Titans or against the Colts or in a playoff game, there's a re-injury from a concussion standpoint. And even then, with the offseason ahead of him, there's a chance to heal up, rest up, get better, just like Tua Tagovailoa, and ultimately protect himself going forward. So no big concern. It is a bit of a bummer that CJ Stroud's going to miss his second game because of the concussion, but there's not a long-term bummer on the horizon, I don't believe. And I don't think DeMeco Ryans was acting up there when he said no. CJ Stroud, he's dealing with the concussion. Everybody deals with it different. That's another thing. When I apply the average time that a guy is in concussion protocol, everybody deals with concussions differently. And it's one thing for your backup linebacker to clear concussion protocol after missing one game. Your franchise quarterback, taking care of him long-term, or really a guy dealing with a concussion situation for the first time, you don't know how their body is going to respond. CJ's is responding actually kind of on average for some quarterbacks. Most quarterbacks miss at least a game, sometimes two, and I gave you the Tua example from a year ago. So no super long-term concern just yet. Keep it in the back of your mind, though, if something pops up again this season or if the concussion issue lingers into next week. Something that could linger for a long time is you winning big playing fantasy football. That's right. You winning big playing fantasy football. My friends at Underdog Fantasy are the best when it comes to fantasy football. Check them out at underdogfantasy.com. If you're signing up for the first time and use my promo code STOOTS, it's right there on the screen, STOOTS, STOOTS. If you're signing up for the first time using my promo code, you're going to get 2 times your first deposit up to $100. My buddy Matt put in $10, so he turned his $10 into 20 right away with the deposit or with the code. And he just sends me winners after winners after winners. It's stat predictions. It's very simple. Higher or lower on predicted stats on the Underdog Fantasy app. When you do the Pick'em format, you can put 2 things together. You can put 5 things together and 20 times your entry. Heck, with the Scorchers, you could up to 100 times your entry as well. We put together a Texans game entry each and every week. We've hit 2 20-timesers this year. So get signed up at underdogfantasy.com. The link's in the description down below. It should autofill the code. If it doesn't autofill the code, Stoots is the code, STOOTS. It'll get you 2 times your first deposit at Underdog Fantasy, and you get to winning like a bunch of my friends and viewers have been winning all season long. And maybe we'll put together a winner with one of these Texans games left here in the regular season and maybe the playoffs. Maybe the playoffs. You got to check out my playoff tiebreakers video if you've missed that. I'll put that in the description down below as well. Having trouble figuring out those tiebreakers? I take you through it in a nice, quick, and easy way. Check that video out as well. We'll link that in the description too. Appreciate you watching the video. Appreciate you entertaining my worry slightly about CJ Stroud's concussion situation. And maybe I'm worried about nothing. I got an old buddy of mine, an old colleague of mine, John Lopez, used to tell me, don't borrow worry. And that's maybe what I'm doing to an extent, but it's just something that I want to have on the radar for all of us, both in a good way. It happened to Tua. He's fine now. In a bad way, it happened to Tua, and then it re-happened again in the same season. We don't want that for CJ Stroud. I do want you to give me a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching the video. Thanks for all the support here on YouTube. It's been a fantastic month here on YouTube. Only more stuff coming here on the channel, so don't miss out on any of it. Thanks for watching the video. Can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.